everyone doing tonight? I'm the New Jersey State Chairman and Rutgers Chapter President for Young Americans for Liberty. Just before we get started, I want to just be aware that our exits are in the front here in the back corners, and this is being filmed. So if you're uncomfortable with that, I'm sorry. But as you know, we're here talking about PC culture, talking about freedom of speech. But it's not about me tonight, obviously. We have Breitbart editor, technology editor, and media firebrand, Milo Yiannopoulos.
In case you haven't heard, Daddy smashed it in New Hampshire. Well, Daddy's done good work in New Hampshire, so your sassy gay uncle has come to spread the love here. I'm going to talk to you actually super briefly. I'm not going to take very long because I know that the exciting bit is the Q&A and everybody wants to talk and have some questions and we're going to have some fun there. So I'm going to talk to you briefly about why I think there are some problems on campuses at the moment, specifically with free speech and coming from one particular political direction, and why it matters, although you might think that most of the people who are asking for free speech to be shut down, demanding safe spaces and trigger warnings and all manner of other bollocks, why these people actually have a sort of outsized influence compared to their actual numbers. Protests are disappointing, by the way. Is there anybody in here who hates me? This is an event for sevens and above, so anyone who's got a hand up, please leave. Feminist movements on campus. I've put an ice cream truck outside. I'm going to rattle through this fairly quickly. Anybody here believe in any of the, let's talk briefly through the politically correct prescriptions of our age. Does anyone here believe that women are paid less than men for the same work? Put your hand up. Everyone who puts their hands up, you're idiots. Does anyone here believe that there is a pervasive culture of rape that means that American university campuses have higher rates of sexual assault than the Congo? More than 1 in 5 women being sexually assaulted. Does anybody believe that about American campuses? Anybody? No? Fewer idiots on that one. These claims, based on advocacy research repeated by credulous journalists, are designed to do one thing. They're designed to push a particular political ideology on you that is divisive, hateful, bigoted, in many cases racist, in many cases sexist, and is simply not very much fun. And I like fun, so I want to talk to you about free speech and how free speech can be fun. Ow! If you're in the audience and you are aggrieved about the gender pay gap, let me make your life happier and explain to you why you're wrong. if you take all of the money that women earn, and all of the money that men earn, and you do a simple sort of division, you will arrive at a figure of, let's say, 79 cents on the dollar. The problem with this is that it is babyish economics of the childish kind that only the progressive left could possibly believe in. The problem with this stuff is it doesn't take into account the different choices that women make. It doesn't take into account the fact that women tend to work shorter hours, they have babies, they do all sorts of other things that mean that it's not an apples to apple, it's not an oranges to oranges comparison. Now the problem with the wage gap is it's used to suggest that if a woman goes into the workplace, she's going to be paid 79 cents for the same work as a man. Well, that confuses wages with earnings. So if you believe that there's a wage gap, I would encourage you to return to the dictionary and learn what wages mean. Because it is illegal to pay a man and a woman differently for the same work. And in fact, it doesn't happen. Now, all sorts of these sort of politically correct prescriptions surround us. There are feminists on campus who are demanding to kill all white men as though that was some sort of move toward equality, when in fact it's simply a gesture of female chauvinism and hatred towards people that the modern intersectional far-left feminist lesbianic movement doesn't like. Lesbians are real, Milo!
Somebody's been watching me too much on YouTube.
I agree with you. It's outside the scope of the present discussion, but since you brought it up. No, I'm not entirely sure there's sex without penises. I don't think that works. The lesbians that we like aren't really lesbians, they're just women in porn, aren't they? And if there are lesbians, it seems to me a sort of fashionable political movement we should stamp out, given the extraordinary rates of domestic violence, the obesity crisis, and by the way, it's an interesting thing. Did you know that there is one respect in which the campus rape crisis is real? Do you know what it is? Can anyone tell me? I've sort of given it away already. There is just one rape crisis on campus. It is the lesbian rape crisis. If you look at the statistics from the Department of Justice, you will see that vastly disproportionately, the women who report sexual assault on campus describe themselves as lesbians. If there is a rape epidemic on campus, it's not being committed by men. And if you look at the justice statistics, which are the gold standard, you'll discover all sorts of things that feminists won't tell you. I'm going to take on a really super quick talk. I want to go on to questions very, very quickly about some of the things that are going on at other universities. Now, Rutgers doesn't have a completely clean pair of hands. You have a reasonable claim here to be one of the universities that sort of invented trigger warnings. You also have, you did. You also have among your graduates a woman called Jessica Valenti. Has anyone heard of Jessica Valenti? Now, I'm not saying that everything at Rutgers, I'm not saying Rutgers is responsible for the creation of Jessica Valenti, but if you're something like Hitler's Austrian Art College. Okay, I forgive you. But yeah, no, I mean, Rutgers has an interesting history with this stuff. You have been at the forefront of many of these innovations. There's a strong feminist presence on campus. There's a strong Black Lives Matter presence on campus. me. These segregated dorms that you guys want, well, you know where to find me. What I find interesting about the movement, regardless of their stated aims, is just how much like the KKK.
Just how
much like the KKK's their objectives are. They want segregated dorms. They want to tear people apart. We can all agree that all lives matter. We can all agree. We can all, I think, agree that chauvinism and divisiveness and spitefulness and hatefulness of the modern progressive movement, which drives people apart instead of bringing them together, is something that we should resist. I think, in the great words of, what was it, Martin Luther King?
He's come here to listen to you! You believe
We can agree, I think, at least I hope we can, that we should This is my favorite section of the audience. We can agree, at least I hope we can agree on some basics, on the basics of classical liberalism, on the basis on which our society is founded, that we should judge people on the contents of their character, that we should interrogate our I think we should also try at least to agree that the way to achieve equality is not to lie about rape.
Oh, okay.
To achieve equality is not to lie about how people are remunerated as feminists do.
Listen to your advice! Listen to your advice! Listen to your advice! Talk about the cutthroat brain like it's nothing!
And we're going to get to questions because I can tell.
Says you have everything. Don't you harass my sister, Dweller!
Milo, drink your
Take your medicine. Take your medicine.
We can agree, I think, the purpose of the university, the reason that we are all here, is to interrogate new ideas, to discover new things about ourselves, to experiment with dangerous ideas, to experiment with new forms of knowledge and to meet new people, to introduce ourselves to new experiences and to learn more about the world around us. Up against that mission, up against what ought to be the central purpose of higher education, what ought to be the reason that we're all here, is a culture of safe spaces and trigger warnings, which seeks to insulate people from anything that might traumatize or upset them. Of course, they're not really traumatized or upset, they're just upset that someone disagrees with them. In my view, anybody who asks for a trigger warning in a safe space should be immediately expelled. they are incapable of fulfilling the requirements of their course. They have demonstrated that they are incapable of exposing themselves to new ideas. They have demonstrated that they are incapable of engaging in the humble pursuit of knowledge.
This man represents hatred!
You're wrong.
Fire code exit is the exit is that way.
I think that was feminist makeup, Milo.
I think we've reached the still my favorite bit of the audience. I think we've reached the limit of what we can constructively get through. I had more. We're going to move on to questions. I'm going to ask you, the questions are the fun bits, whatever way it comes from. So let's skip ahead. We're going to go to questions. I'm going to ask you, anybody can ask anything. Ask me whatever you want. I know that a lot of you have read and listened to a lot of my stuff, so you'll have questions about that.
Okay, I have a question.
I'm happy.
Take your notes, take your notes.
I'm freedom of speech in this university.
Questions. Some of them you won't agree with. Many of us don't agree with this guy. That's perfectly fine. We are here to interrogate some ideas after all. So we ought to, unlike the left, try to at least engage the other side of the argument. I noticed when they were asked questions, they left the room. So let's move on to the questions. I'm going to ask. If you would like to answer the question. that would be a good way.
If you guys want to respectfully ask some questions, we're gonna pick on some people. We're actually, all right, please, let's talk for a second. Go ahead, you pull the first one.
Milo, what's up? How are you?
Hello.
I sent you a picture on Twitter with Ben Shapiro on the show.
With who?
With Ben Shapiro.
Oh, dear Ben, we love that. Very short, but long.
So my question is,
Yeah.
how can you identify as being gay and be for the conservative party? Like, I agree with you that you can, but I want to play devil's advocate.
Sure. Well, I think homosexuals are natural libertarians. It doesn't make very much sense for gay people to be subsidizing pregnancies if they take a self-interested approach to taxation, for instance. We know that men pay way more into the system, pay far more in taxation. Women take far more out. They die later, they have babies, they get sick more. As a gay man, why should I subsidize pregnancies? I don't care. So there's a view that homosexuals are natural libertarians, and I think I agree with that. The problem the left has with people like me is that I've sort of gone off ideological reservation. I'm a traitor to the left because although I like to suck dick, I like to suck dick. I don't believe in a massive state that sucks all of our taxes out and doesn't give us any control over where our money goes. These views are considered dangerous, hence the name of the talk. Because the left can't get me on any of their usual argumentative strategies. Now, normally when you hear somebody complaining about feminism or the wage gap or whatever, the normal response of the left is to try to delegitimize the speaker rather than attack the argument. So they'll call him a bigot, they'll call him a misogynist, they'll call him a sexist. They can't really get away with that with me. Similarly on the way off, because I don't really care about it one way or the other. I don't want to fucking fat or thin, ladies. So I don't care too much about that kind of stuff, and actually I think it makes perfect sense in an age when gays rightly have many of the same, most, if not all, of the same rights and entitlements as everybody else, for them to continue to vote for progressive parties that do not act in their interests. Now, for me, the essence of gay culture, the essence of the best thing about being gay is the ability to be dissident, to be naughty, to be mischievous, to push the boundaries of what can be thought and said. That's the essence of drag culture. It's the essence of much of the many of the dissident gay thinkers of the past, William S. Burroughs, Quentin Crisp. I like to think of myself as being in a similar tradition. The people, these sort of dissident gay thinkers are given license to think outside the box because they're not constrained by the traditional structures like marriage, which is why I think gay marriage is a bit of a shame. Gay people are where Mother Nature experiments, where she plays around and sees what's possible, which is why gays are so overrepresented in artists, philosophers, politicians, many of the sort of leading elites of the world. Gay people are very overrepresented in those groups. We have higher IQ than the rest of you, on average, as well, which doesn't hurt. So I don't see anything particularly contradictory about being conservative and gay. I think it's probably more accurate to say I'm libertarian and gay, and I think that simply makes perfect sense. Yeah, that's about it.
Would you like to ask a question?
Oh yeah, thanks for skipping. Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Because the sun's kissing me too much.
Someone tries to question.
Hello. Also, I suppose fellow gay.
Hello. Honey. Do you have a question or raise your identity?
Yes, actually, regarding political correctness, I've always understood it as, I suppose, a historically marginalized group wanting to control how or what they were called. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm a black man, obviously, clearly. However, beforehand, until very recently in our history, there were lots of other words that I could have been called. Mm-hmm. From my perspective, political correctness is making sure that other people don't do that. Where are there inconsistencies between you and I in that thinking? Oh, and also Black Lives Matter.
So I think the differences between, there are three related terms here that I don't think have very much to do with one another. There's courtesy, there's racism, and there's political correctness. Now, courtesy describes a set of codes that we all use to navigate the world successfully and to communicate with one another. The reality is that we're all a little bit sexist and we're all a little bit racist. Everybody is, to a larger and lesser extent. Now, the left believes that you can stamp that out by policing language. They think that if you change the words you use for things, that you can change reality. Well, you can't. You can't make people unracist by banning the N-word. You can't stop people being homophobic by banning school children from using the word gay in the playground. That's not how it works. So the purpose of a civilized society is for all of us to enable all of us to live together in harmony, to communicate with one another, and to successfully build businesses and have interpersonal relationships with one another, despite our limitations and our bigotries, and not to try to stamp them out. Now, that's what we call courtesy or etiquette and politeness. Racism is something different. The N-word is racism. That doesn't really fall into that bucket. It's presumably the main word that you were referring to. Political correctness is something a bit different. Courtesy and consideration, politeness, etiquette, we use to navigate the world so as not to run up against other people unnecessarily. We use it as social lubricant. But political correctness is a bit different. Political correctness seeks to reduce the scope of acceptable thought and language in order to guide discussion in a particular ideological direction. So when, for example, feminists want to ban particular words, or political correctness takes on its other weird manifestation, enables you to say what are effectively bigoted and racist things about particular groups, like the straight white man of mythology, who, according to all the data, is doing really badly, according to the media and liberal groups on campus, is ruling the world. The patriarchy is not doing a very good job, if that's the case. Because young white boys are being thrown on Ritalin and Adderall when they're in school. At college, they're subject to consent classes that tell them they're all potential rapists when they get into the workplace. They're 2-to-1 discriminated against in STEM fields, so women will get jobs just for being women. If there is a patriarchy, it's not doing a very good job. And political correctness seeks to hide these things from us. It's a kind of elaborate form of lying, which uses language in order to close off certain avenues of debate. Now, no one's going to argue with you, sir, that nobody should be using the N-word, but there are all sorts of other things that go on that are designed to limit the acceptable bounds of speech and thought. And that's, for example, the trigger warning in safe space culture. That is political correctness in action. That's very different from what you described. So that would be, I think, where we differ if we differ.
So I have a question. You said earlier you believe that you think that the Black Lives Matter movement and the KKK are equivalent. I have some trouble believing this. Their stated agendas are very different. The KKK seeks to control, terrorize, and harm people who are not white, whereas the Black Lives Matter movement seems to be interested in protesting what they see as inequalities in the system.
Well, the Black Lives Matter movement certainly is relaxed about terrorizing black I didn't actually call them equivalent. What I said was the world they want looks quite similar. In terms of the segregation they want, the sort of racial divisions they like to stir. Except to say one thing about Black Lives Matter, and that is that it is possible. I'll say one more thing about Black Lives Matter. misogynist, which is rude. I don't care what you believe in, but you're being rude, so stop it. We were talking about earlier, remember? I think it's possible to believe that, as I do, that black people have some valid grievances in this country. That the legacy of slavery is still with us. That black people deserve some restitution. They still are owed something. It is possible to believe that, and yet at the same time believe that Black Lives Matter is not the answer. That's what I think. To equate, as Black Lives Matter so often does, anybody who disagrees with their particular methods.
So what's the answer? You want the answer or not?
Well, for a start, black communities should stop voting Democrats into local government. By any objective measure, race relations compared to when Obama came into office are a disaster. Obama has done nothing. Once again, being rude, and I'd like you to wait until
Because you're lying! That's the point!
Oh my God, words!
Tumblr is not a credible source.
About the American university system
Tumblr?
of Black Lives Matter movement hasn't understood yet. And it is that if you go to somebody with an open mind, intellectual humility, and you ask them to have a discussion with you, you present your version of the argument, you present the facts, and you ask them for a calm, mature discussion, the chances are they'll listen. And the chances are that you'll be able to reach an accommodation. The chances are that at least you will have a good idea of what the other person believes. Black Lives Matter prefers to simply shout until the other person knows what they can move on to the next question. Shall I just point it to the end? Yeah.
Milo, what are some of your favorite designers and brands?
I'm in New England today, which is a very fine British tailor on Jermyn Street. If you ever get the chance to go to London, it's just behind Fortnum & Mason, which is our fanciest department store, possibly after Harrods. Harrods is attacking these days. Other than that, Ralph Lauren, one of yours. And, I don't know, probably, who's my favourite? Maybe, yeah, maybe Armani. Okay, next question. Okay, what's that over there? Yeah?
Milo, what do you think about the refugee crisis in Europe? Like, I don't hear much about that or anything, especially in the States. It's some of my classes.
Yeah, you're relatively well insulated from the consequences of mass Muslim immigration in America, because we haven't really had any yet. In Europe we have, and we've seen some of the results. Now, the argument that is sometimes made about, for example, Britain is that it is a melting pot, that it has always been a nation formed by immigrants, and to an extent that's true, but there's been one unifying factor in England's history, which no longer obtained. And the unifying factor was a set of values that Britain exported to the rest of the world, including America. And in fact, America has taken those values and taken them up to their fullest, highest, and most perfect expression. The values of freedom, of democracy, of property rights, of freedom of speech. You guys, by and large, it makes me sad to see America slide into European-style healthcare and European-style language policing under this president. Because America great is that it took the values that Britain didn't invent, but it did export successfully to most of the world, and turned them into, almost the perfect experiment in democracy, the perfect experiment for freedom of speech. Nowhere else in the world has the sort of free speech protections that America has. You should be very lucky. You should feel very lucky. There is a safe space in America. It's called the United States. It's what enables you guys to be rude. It's what enables you guys to be awesome. It's what enables all of you to say what you feel, how you like. And that safe space, which we call America, is the best distillation of those values. Now, the problem is that those values are under threat in Europe, and the threat that they're coming under is from radical Islam. Politicians have lied for generations, and the media has lied for generations to voters about what exactly mass Muslim immigration would mean. I wrote a column saying, as a gay man, I'm relatively terrified of it, because I've seen what happens in Germany, I've seen what happens in Sweden. In Sweden, government officials said that gay people were being unnecessarily provocative for having their gay pride march go through a predominantly Muslim area. Extraordinary. Well, actually, that's the point of gay pride. It's to stick two fingers up at reactionary, bigoted, backward cultures. So the answer to, the easy answer is stay in America. If you want to solve the crisis in Europe, these people need to be deported. Next question, please. I'll come this next up, answer this one.
Okay. So, like, the radical feminists, before they got the narrative, they actually had some things going wrong with them, and then when they actually did get the narrative and they got into government and did all the things, they won, and now they had to go quit their job and actually get a actually paying job or marry a rich person, right? So then,
What's the question, sir?
Okay. That's what I heard. Anyway, so the men's rights movement is going to do the same thing. It's going to succeed to the feminist thing, going to get the government, passing laws, getting the narrative. Are we going to see the same thing happening with men's rights, sort of like these radical masculinists kind of thing?
Yeah, I'll talk to you a little bit about men's rights movement. I'm not a men's rights activist. The reason that I occasionally write things they like is because by and large they're right. They are right in many cases about the way that society is being re-architected to be quite hostile toward men. They are right about a media culture that makes it perfectly socially acceptable to say, kill all white men. It makes it perfectly socially acceptable to say the most appalling, bigoted, nasty, spiteful, vicious things about men, and for the most part women, so we can take it, that if they were reversed the other way would be considered the most appalling sort of sexism. Now, the media has created an environment in which it is open season on men. And for the most part, men being stoical creatures have sort of just put up with it. It's reached fever pitch now, it's reached such extraordinary proportions that even women are giving up on feminism because they realise that it is a poisonous creed that pushes the genders apart. For instance, in America, in just 2 years, and this was reported by Vox, who would not have shared these statistics unless they really had to, in just 2 years, the number of American women identifying as feminists went from 28 to 18%. In the UK, it's even lower because we're far more sensible than you. The number of women who identify as feminists in the UK is a beautiful 7%. So yes, they're really on the back. What women recognise, I think, rightly, is that although the feminist movement of the first and to some extent the second wave was one of the great achievements of civilization, one of the best things we ever did, one of the greatest things that we have done that we can be proud of is giving women the vote, giving women equal access to our institutions, and treating them equally in the workplace. That is not something that most of the world can claim, and we should be proud of having done it. But, yeah, we should be proud of having done it. I mean, it seems slightly silly to congratulate ourselves for giving the women the vote. And that's precisely my point. It seems obvious to us. It isn't in most of the world. And just like free speech isn't obvious in most of the world, just like many other things that we take for granted aren't obvious in most of the world. The problem with modern intersectional feminism is it's become, as Christina Summers likes to say, a sort of female, yes, she's one, yes. By the way, don't know how many of you travel regularly, but Christina and I are going to do a joint lecture on feminism in Minnesota. It's called Calm Down. So it's on the 17th of February, so if you want to hear us more specifically on those issues. The problem with modern intersectional feminism is, as she says, it's become a sort of female chauvinism, where almost a kind of female supremacy, where men are routinely vilified and ridiculed. The men's rights movement has correctly identified this phenomenon, and they're the men who don't just stoically put up with it, because they're the men that recognise this generates some problems. It generates some problems if you have a child who you can't see. It generates some problems if you divorce somebody and, for no apparent reason, lose half your shit. Sometimes these days are right. It creates some unfairnesses. Women cannot at once shriek at men for holding doors open for them, and at the same time claim, demand the sort of courtesy and consideration that we have, for example, enshrined in our tax code, where they get to pay much, much less in and take much, much more out for no apparent good reason. So the men's rights movement, from my perspective as a gay guy, mostly right about things. Now, I don't particularly like the tenor of a lot of the conversations they have, but consider this. Men have been told for 30 years by feminists that women want to be treated just like men, that they're just the same, they're exactly the same, there's no difference, any difference between the genders is socially constructed, women are just as tough and just as able as men. In many cases they are, but in many cases they're not as tough as men. And in many cases, women actually are sensitive creatures, and what feminists have done is sort of beat out chivalry from the public square, which I think is a shame. They've encouraged men to treat women not as precious objects to be worshipped, but rather as combatants in a culture war. I don't think that's healthy. And when feminists tell men, treat us just like you treat each other, well, that's what the men's rights movement does. Because taunting is how men bond. If you go into a locker room, which I have, if you go into a locker room on a sports pitch or taking part in any kind of competitive sport, you will know that taunting is one of the ways men bond. Well, men can cope with it, women very often can't. I debated a professor on this on Sky News who admitted very readily that women cry more often.
I'm still sitting here. No, shut up!
Let's move on to the next question.
Your article was about Neil deGrasse Tyson and Bill Nye.
Yeah.
They've legitimized views that I've held for a long time. I know they're not your most popular work, but are you going to continue with that, and who's next? Because I would love.
Yeah, I have a series. Scientists who are actually really stupid. My series started with Neil deGrasse Tyson, who was very stupid. Bill Nye, who was very stupid. I'm not sure where to go next with it. I think Michael Mann, who is the hockey stick curve guy, one of the most discredited memes in science, or possibly Stephen Hawking. I haven't decided yet. Sam Harris! Next question. Let's get more from the side. Yeah, over there. Yeah.
Milo, my question to you is, do you think Black Lives Matter is what the proponents of it make it out to be, a systemic, deliberate killing of black men targeted by the police? If so, what would it take for the moment to blow over? Will time just alleviate the sort of tension we see as a result of this?
It's very obvious that the approaches so far haven't worked. I understand why black people in this country are angry. They deserve to be. They're right to be angry. But the sort of racially divisive, hateful, intolerant, yell until they shut up and go away, intimidatory tactics of Black Lives Matter is very clearly not the way to repair tensions between the races. You don't fix a society and enable people to work together and be happy together and live, love, and prosper together by driving division between the races, and that is the effect of Black Lives Matter. That's very simple. What happens with this movement? Who knows? I think that much of the impetus of Black Lives Matter comes from a sort of white liberal guilt. and you see a lot of the journalists who support it most fervently in the media are all sort of bitter 35-year-old white liberals. And very often they buy into this sort of, oh, we're responsible for all the awful things in the world. Well, let's just get real on this, okay? Well, yeah, but we also went to the moon and built the internet and... You see that kind of one-upmanship is precisely what Black Lives Matter is designed to create, and I don't believe that's the way to have dialogue. I don't believe that's the way for us to heal. I don't think that's the way to really get on. I'll tell you an interesting, the reason we don't have this problem in England, we have a very different history when it comes to slavery in England, but I'll tell you why we don't have a Black Lives Matter in England. And it's because... it's because the majority of black people who came into England originally, Afro-Caribbeans, came with the same set of values that many of the white locals had. They believed, many of them had gone to English schools, they believed in some of the same values British people had, and this is one of the reasons why, in Britain at least, Caribbeans have some of the highest rates of interracial marriages of any group in Britain. Because the black people that...
Caribbean.
Sorry?
How did they get to the Caribbean?
As I said shut up! As I said earlier, we don't have the same problem with this in the UK, partly because we don't have such a large community that is so obviously deserving of restitution. My suggestion is that black people should stop voting for Democrats, I said that earlier, because that clearly hasn't worked. All the racial tensions, all of the overflowings have happened in Democrat-run cities. And they've happened because black people vote badly. They vote for Democrats. What they should be doing is voting for people who are going to instill a sense of aspiration in local communities and not perpetuate victimhood. Because the perpetuation of victimhood and grievance culture, which is sort of what we're talking about in feminism and communities generally, is precisely what's holding American black communities down. And until people stop playing the victim and stop trying to rank races against one another, which is what Black Lives Matter tries to do, we're not going to get The only time I want to be up against a black man is after the local game. Next question. Yeah.
So how do you reconcile being a libertarian with what are universally considered to be fascist values of supporting entire ethnic groups?
Strong man.
Or religious groups?
Yes, good question. I think that we often suspend many of our rights principles in times of, for example, in times of war. I think that the threat posed by radical Islam to the foundation of our culture, to everything that Western nations are, represents a threat so significant that we need to very carefully consider whether these people are allowed to join our societies. Now, very often you'll hear from people about the immigration debate, well, the Constitution protects free speech and all that kind of stuff. The Constitution doesn't apply to non-citizens, nor do any of the other freedoms and protections that we have in this country and in the UK and any other European country. Those freedoms, those libertarian provisions, only apply to people who live here. We don't mandate, well, let's pay taxes. Pay taxes. We're not under any obligation to import barbaric, backward cultures, which suppress women, which discriminate against homosexuals, which are the genuine patriarchy, if there is one anywhere in the world. Because it's not on American college campuses, it's in Raqqa. We're under no obligation to import those people into our communities. I'm a libertarian as far as I believe that when you live in this country or you live in the UK and you pay taxes and you subscribe to the values of that country, you should be free. You should be left alone and be free to do as you want. That doesn't mean that 5 million people should be allowed to come in who are dedicated to the destruction of our way of life.
So one thing interesting about this Republican primary and kind of the fight for the soul of the party. So I want to know what you see as the future of the party as far as like building a new coalition, like what demographics and interests and stuff.
Well, obviously, there's a sort of populist contingent that started the Tea Party, now represented by Trump, and I think many people like me fall into that bucket as well, which is rightly astonished by the extent to which the Republican establishment has completely given up on its own vote. The Republican establishment, in many respects, simply does not reflect America anymore, doesn't represent its values, doesn't represent its voters, doesn't speak to its voters, and in some cases even actively dislikes them. You get the sense very often from people like Rick Wilson, this Republican activist, and from much of the old press, that Republican voters, that when they seem to treat Republican voters like liberals used to treat Republican voters, like they were backward bigots, like they were, you know, hillbillies in pickup trucks with guns and religion. I'm sorry?
Anime porn.
Well, you see, hentai. They have tentacles. It distresses me to see that. The left doesn't do this, and I don't know why. I don't know why we do, because the left has never done this. I don't understand what happened that the Republican establishment decided it was going to look up to liberals for approval and say, is this okay? Is this racist? Is this sexist? With the result that they no longer play offense, they only play defense. This is my perspective as an outsider anyway. The Republican establishment seems to me, the Republican Party in this country seems to me no longer fit for purpose. So I'm very happy to see somebody blowing it apart, and I think we should be very grateful for that. Yeah!